Yeah, so just now we have learned how to make double entry when an asset has increased and an asset has decreased. So both sides are asset. And if you see this 4,000 4,000 both has same amount. Yeah. So one of the principle which we have discussed earlier, the debit and credit has to be uh, same amount. So now let's go a bit further where there is one asset and one liability. Okay. So first we have to understand what are the liabilities. There can be many liabilities. For our examples, let's assume bank overdraft, loan, and creditors are liability. So what is the rules as per modern method? When any liability decreases, then you debit that liability. Okay, so this is just opposite of the rule of asset. Yeah, so if liability decreases, debit that liability. If the liability increases, credit that liability. So it is just opposite of asset. What you do for asset. Okay, and there is one more rule which will help you to understand our next entry bit more, which is traditional method. It says on the personal account. What is personal account? It is basically a person, an organization, not our organization, some other organization or any third party. So anybody else other than our organization, yeah, anybody else is personal account. So what the rule says? Debit the receiver. Okay, so if he receives something from us, then debit him, that third party. Credit the giver. If he gives us something, then credit him. So suppose he gives us 1,000 cash. Suppose the party name is A. A gives us 1,000 cash. So he is a giver. So we will credit A. In the same way, if we pay 1,000 or let's say 2,000 cash to him, he is a receiver. So we will debit A by 2,000. I'll explain you this more in the next example. So the transaction is we buy a computer on credit. Okay, we don't pay cash. We buy the computer on credit from a supplier C. Okay, computer is asset. Supplier C is liability, a creditor, and also a personal account. It can be both. Yeah, it can be personal account or both. So what you will debit? Okay, the amount is 3,000. So what you will debit? Computer you have bought on credit for at 3,000. Computer is an asset, so you will debit computer. The rule is same. Debit what comes in. If you see the traditional method, debit what comes in. So we debited what comes in. And so let's prove it with the modern method. Debit the asset when it increases. So we have debited the asset when it has increased. So that's why we have debited computer by 3,000. Now, as you know, we have to credit something. And what we should credit? Okay, supplier C. He has given us computer. He has not taken the money. He has just given us computer. So what he becomes? He becomes a giver. Yeah. Since he becomes a giver, what we are saying? Credit the giver. Yeah. So we will credit the giver. This is as per the traditional approach. Let's go at the modern approach. We know if somebody pays us or gives us something, he becomes our creditor. And creditor is a liability. You know that. That is something you have to understand. That liability, creditors, bank overdraft loans are liability. So, and the liability has increased. So if you go to our modern approach, which says when the liability increases, you credit the liability. It is just opposite than the asset. When the asset increase, you debit asset, but when the liability increase, you credit asset. So if you see both traditional and modern method, you credit supplier by 3000, and both entries, this is negative again, and both entries, both the side of this entry sums to 0. Yeah, it's equal. So if you note down this, how and why we have debited computer and why we have credited computer. Now what happens next? For example, we pay cash to this supplier. Okay, after a few days we pay cash to this supplier. Okay, so let's understand the credit size first. We know cash is an asset which has decreased because we have paid out the cash. It's the same concept like we have bought the furniture. So in the same way we have paid cash to somebody. So credit what goes out. Traditional method, modern method, asset has decreased. That's why we have credited cash by 3000. Okay, what we will debit? Okay, we will debit to supplier. Why? A, because supplier is liability. We know that. And we have paid to this supplier. So when the liability decreases, you debit liability as per the modern method. So when asset increases, you debit, and when asset decreases, you debit, but it's just opposite in liability. When the liability decreases, you debit the liability. That's what we have done. Liability decrease, debit liability. See this. See this grid. Asset, debit when you increase. Liability, liability, debit when it decreases. Okay. At the same time, debit the receiver. Who is receiver? Supplier is receiver. Yeah. Supplier C is receiver. That's why we have debited him. Traditional method, debit receiver, credit giver. So in this way, he is debit, he is receiver. So, so, so in this way, if you understand this full concept, you will know. Okay, thank you.